Hey, Craig, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So, I wanted to kick things off. As a former athlete and somebody who loves to do endurance work, who loves to train all the time, long COVID and a lot of the symptoms around exercise can be one of the most frustrating things. And I wondered, could you start off by telling us what does it mean to be allergic to exercise?
Yeah, it's pretty ironic given my hobby, passion, and career is all based around endurance sports. But yeah, it's just, I guess, like anything else, being allergic to something, um, you consume the thing and your body has an adverse reaction, and it just seems that I have developed, and many other people have developed, this kind of allergic reaction to exercise. I don't know if that's necessarily physiologically what's going on, but that's what seems to happen. Is that, as I said, you expose yourself to something, and your body has a bad reaction to it. And yeah, I'm not allergic to anything as far as I'm aware, in my 32 years on this earth, but I have now somehow developed what seems like an allergic reaction to exercise, which is, yeah, as I said, extremely unfortunate given that my whole life basically uh, is centered around or was centered around sport and exercise.
Yeah, I think this is with a lot of these kind of chronic conditions. This is one of the most bizarre and frustrating symptoms, right? It's impossible to try and describe that. Many things you can kind of describe, whether it be sort of headaches and pains, aches, but describing the intolerance to exercise and the inability to exercise is something that's so bizarre you can't even comprehend it. So trying to then explain it is near impossible. I I'd love to hear a little bit about your story before getting long COVID, and then
Sure.
and then what you've been experiencing after, just to give the listeners
Yeah.
a little bit of context and see the sort of journey that you've come on.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting, what you said there about not being able to explain it to other people. I've often said when people have asked me, like, if myself from 2 years ago could meet myself now, myself from two years
Mm.
ago, myself from 2 years ago would be like, oh, come on, bro, just go for a run, like run it off, or you're just a bit tired, just a couple of nights sleep and whatever, or like it's all in your head, push through it, all these sorts of things. But it's almost, yeah, until you don't know until you know. And like now that I have experienced this thing, it's hard to explain to people that haven't had it, and it's almost like they just can't relate. And then I can speak to people like yourself and others who have experienced similar things, and there is obviously an understanding there on both sides, which you know doesn't necessarily make it any better, but it is nice, I guess, in some ways to know that you're not the only person experiencing this. Obviously, you don't or wouldn't wish it on anybody else, but it's, I guess, in some ways good to know that you're not alone. But yeah, to kind of go a bit onto my background. So I got COVID in, well, so I'll start from the very beginning, I guess. I got COVID the first time in June 2021, and recovered within a couple of days. I then got both my vaccines, and then in October 2021, and then got COVID again. I was totally fine, and then got COVID again in July 2022, after which point I've not recovered, and I've had long COVID since. And the reason I do this with long COVID is because it is a diagnosis of elimination. So,
Mm.
you know, it might be something else, or it might be a combination of other things, or yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but the conclusion that I and others have come to is that it is or can be classified as long COVID. Prior to that, in terms of my kind of background in endurance sports, I'd like to say, quite fit. I was completed multiple Ironmans and ultra endurance events. Actually, 3 months before getting COVID, the most recent time, I just completed a 100-mile ultra, which was 34 hours non-stop running the West Highland Way in Scotland, which is, yeah, obviously quite a big challenge. Managed to fully recover from that, and then I was back on training for an Ironman, which was going to be on, I can't remember the exact date now, 5th of August, I think. So it was exactly 3 weeks from when I got COVID until my race. And unfortunately, when I got COVID that time, in hindsight now, I knew that I had COVID, but I think like most athletes, they kind of kid themselves with whether it's injuries or illnesses or whatever it is. Obviously, it's a good thing to be able to push through negative thoughts, feelings, pain in sometimes. But
Mhm.
in that instance, it was unfortunately not the best decision, and I pushed on for another week. I backed off my training, but that was still, running for an hour, cycling for 3 hours, 3K swim, things like that. So
You backed off, haven't
yeah,
I?
so that was an easy week, but I was just
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
just unfortunately at this crunch point of it was 3 weeks to go to my race. I think if it had been 2 weeks, I
Mm.
would have backed off training completely because I'd said, right, I just need to recover from the race. And if it had been 4 weeks, I think I would have said, okay, I can give myself a week. But it's because it was 3 weeks, and obviously this is all in hindsight, and the same thing probably would have happened at 4 or 2 weeks. But the way I've thought about it is, it was just so unfortunate. It was right at that point where I had a week left of hard training to go before my taper, and I just wanted to get that training in. Whereas if it had been a week earlier, a couple of weeks earlier, I could have taken a week off and mentally allowed myself to do that to then build back into the race. Or if it had been a week or a couple of weeks later, I would have said, I need to get to the race in top shape. So I'm just going to back off. But it was just unfortunate in that middle ground where I made the decision to keep pushing a little bit with my training. Obviously, I'd backed off intensity wise and everything like that. But yeah, I definitely don't think that did me any favors long term.
Mm. That's a very common thread, I think, with a lot of post viral illnesses. A lot of people who either in a relatively kind of stressful state, and then they have this kind of trigger that might be an illness or a bacterial infection, whatever it may be, and then following then, very often, people are pushing through, and then that leads to a kind of perpetual state with some of those
Yeah.
symptoms.
I think I did have some other stressors as well around that time. Again, like unsure how related they are, but I know like so just the weekend before I got ill, I'd done a half Ironman, which was obviously a bit of a stressor on the body. I'd also got sunburnt that week, which again, like your immune system is going to be dealing with that, and I also had like I guess the life stress of like preparing to travel abroad for a race. So I was kind of trying to organize all of that stuff over and above kind of normal life. So I think it was you never know how much all of these factors play a part. But as far as I understand of long COVID or whatever it is that I have, it is just essentially stress overload. And, the body can't differentiate between stress, whether that's from COVID, from another virus, from, arguing with your partner, being stressed at work, all these sorts of things. It is training. It is all just stress on your system. And I think there is a point you can get to that your body just breaks and says like, I need to protect this vehicle that is carrying me around on this earth, and the way that I can do that is to just shut me down. And that's as far as I understand what's happened. It's now a case of, okay, how do I get the key, or how do I convince the body to that it is okay, and I'm not on that path, and I'll be more sensible with managing my stress, or all these sorts of things. That's my understanding of now, or yeah, finding the key to unlock the padlock sort of thing.
Mhm. So, what has that felt like in terms of following catching COVID, and then you had a period where you were really struggling, and then trying to get back in terms of recovery, because everybody knows what it's like to have a broken ankle, and then you have to go through this period of you know gradually improving and gradually increasing your
Yeah,
levels of exercise, and how that kind of affects getting back into the game. Can you describe a bit about what you've been experiencing the last couple of years since?
yeah. So in terms of symptoms, my symptoms have well, yeah, and my symptoms have basically been the same throughout, which is just this heaviness. Like I use the word fatigue, but I don't love the word fatigue. In this instance, like I don't mind the word for certain circumstances, but I don't necessarily always feel fatigued. I would also put fatigue as like mental, whereas there's a lot of time that my mind is like ready to go, but my body's just not. So it's this like physical heaviness, fatigue, whatever you want to call it. And that's been a fairly constant symptom throughout. I also had a couple of weird symptoms. Like at the start, I had this very strange like itch that would come on in the night. That was only for around a month, but obviously quite strange. I've never had any kind of like, as I said at the start, like allergic reactions to anything, or hay fever, or any of these sorts of things. So I don't know what that was all about. It did seem to be treated with can't remember the name of the things you can get in the supermarket for hay fever.
Antihistamines.
That's the one. So I
Antihistamines.
would,
Yeah.
yeah, so I would take antihistamines, and it would treat it, but I didn't love the idea of just like taking antihistamines all the time. So I would try and obviously not take them, and then the itch would come back, and it was just kind of this cat and mouse game for around a month. Um, Other than that, I haven't from memory had any other symptoms. It's just been this kind of wave, or like it kind of comes and goes, this kind of heaviness, I would call it, is the best way to describe it. And sometimes it seems to be random, but sometimes it is definitely linked to overdoing it on my new level of normal, which is potentially even just, doing a bit too much socializing, or going for a walk that was slightly too long, or any of these sorts of things that to me 2 years ago would have been, nothing.
Mm-hmm. I think that heaviness is quite a key word, because often when we hear fatigue and tiredness, we think of when you've done too much exercise, or you've trained a lot, and you haven't slept enough, and you have that per se normal kind of fatigue, which you feel tired, and then you go to bed, you feel like, and you it's simply a case of resting yourself to get back to the point where you're not fatigued again. But as you kind of indicated there's that kind of low grade heaviness. There's almost, I often describe it as a little bit kind of flu-like, that sort of just resides within your bones almost, and just keeps you just unable to feel that kind of normal, healthy degree of movement, of energy. It feels like you kind of have, I heard somebody describe it as feeling like they have cement kind of poured into their into their bones a bit.
Mine like very specifically seems to be mostly across like my upper body, like in my shoulders and like in my triceps. That's like where I like know to look or to feel. If I wake up in the morning and I'm kind of like, how do I feel today? I'll just like kind of see how my upper body's feeling. Obviously, like the worse it gets, the more it spreads, but that's where it seems to like start. But yeah, I heard another person talk about it. It's like they wake up, it feels like they've got like a suit of armor on, and that is kind of like how it feels. And it's like you say, normal fatigue is like, oh, I need to go to bed or sleep in a bit tomorrow. Like I'll, set my alarm for a little bit later, or, eat a bit more food, or, whatever. Whereas this just doesn't seem to, it's relentless. It's like, no matter if I just don't set an alarm for tomorrow, sleep for as long as I want, nap through the day, sleep that well for a week, a month, it's like, it just doesn't go away, which normally those sorts of things do if you're just a little bit tired, or, you trained a bit too hard. I'd like to think I'm fairly familiar with, kind of like normal levels of fatigue, having, trained ultra endurance for quite a lot of years. I'm kind of familiar with what it feels like to feel fatigued, and to, push through that or not, based on, what's the right thing to do. And I've not made the right decision every time, but sometimes you push on and it makes it a lot worse, and then you just need to recover more. Whereas with this, it's like it just feels as if you need to recover more, even if you're doing like the maximum you can for recovery, sitting on the couch all day, doing all the kind of normal recovery things. Nothing seems to help, really.
This is one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the podcast, because very often when we see people who have these kind of energy related illnesses, very often there's this kind of misconception that there is a degree of deconditioning or lack of fitness, or often it's kind of put down to a lack of willpower per se to want to get back to a normal life, because people can't necessarily comprehend what is going on. But obviously, as somebody who's ran multiple 100-mile races, Ironmans, triathlons, whatever, you're clearly not somebody who is averse to doing a bit of hard work, and averse to training hard, and averse to it's something that is an integral part of your life. So when people say maybe this is just a case of lacking the willpower to get back to what you were doing before, or when people would say maybe you're just lacking some conditioning, maybe you're deconditioned, and what you need to do is slowly increment your way up, like if you've been out for a number of months due to an injury.
Yeah.
What do you say to those responses?
Yeah, I mean, the fitness thing, like the funny thing is, like, I don't actually feel that unfit. Like the small amount of training that I am able to do, my heart rate's been like pretty good. My, numbers are all pretty good on that side of things. Like, obviously I'm not as fit as I was. Like, that's just like a fact. I'm not trying to claim I'm some sort of superhuman that hasn't lost any fitness over 21 months of basically no training. So on that side, I think definitely I'm slightly less fit, but as a job, I coach people to do similar things to what I do. So I'm quite familiar with what an unfit person looks like, and what to look for in numbers, and how to structure a training program to bring someone back to fitness. So on the fitness side, I think it's definitely not just that. And then the bit about it just being a lack of willpower, as you say, I feel like, yeah, I'm not really lacking in that department when, I apply myself to something. And, obviously, like, this is my number one priority in the whole world at the moment, is to get better. And it's almost the inverse. And, I've obviously had to sit with these thoughts for a long time, and I've thought a lot about it and thought, maybe this is all in my head, or maybe this is something that I can think myself out of or push myself through. And I've tried, and it is not the case. Like, I've gone out and tried to just run hard or cycle or swim, and it's been 21 months. It's been a long time. So, I've been through phases of, I've done a phase of, well, there was a huge phase where I had to just accept my situation, which was obviously really hard to deal with. And then once I got through that, I kind of applied my same, I guess, like, commitment and like discipline to the opposite of what I used to do, which was just like complete rest, like chill, like just run on like the lowest amount of energy possible every day, and just really allow for this like deep rest to happen. Or what I thought was going to happen is, maybe I just need to, like, so I dedicated myself to that for a number of months, and then I slowly started to build back up, and it just didn't work. So yeah, I'd like to think that I'm fairly, kind of well versed in these sorts of things, and there's nothing that I have managed to do, obviously, that has worked. So I don't think anyone would really be able to either will themselves out of this situation or just get a bit fitter and see results. I think it's just different, and I think, as we already mentioned, you can't describe it to someone until you've experienced it. And it's, yeah, one of my friends even said, like, oh, do you not think it might just be like you're just a little bit unfit? And I'm like, no, like, I know what it feels like to be unfit. I'm not just one of these guys that's been an athlete their whole life and whatever. I've been on my own journey through, going I was really fit as a kind of teenager, rowing to quite a high level, and then went completely away from exercise, found partying and that side of things, didn't exercise for years, and then came back, got back into running. So I've gone through that cycle of, being overweight, being unable to run for 1 kilometer, all these sorts of things. So I don't think it's that either. Like, I know what it feels like to be just unfit, and it is definitely not that. And as I said, looking at my numbers now, like, I know I'm obviously not fit, but I'm not unfit. I'm not by like the kind of normal population standards. I'm not an unfit person. Like, I'm not struggling to walk 10,000 steps or, go for a run or, whatever it is.
And it's that difference between the being deconditioned and being unfit versus that almost like illness that comes on as a result of exercise. I've talked about that endless times. With when I was off, I had a broken ankle, I had a surgery on it. I was off for about 6 months, didn't do anything, got back to training. Doing that, I'd be gassed after the end of my sessions, but it was normal. It was like a normal kind of fatigue, and I'd finish the session, I'd feel exhausted, but it was a good exhausted. I'd go home, I'd rest, I'd wake up the next day, I'd feel slightly better, and you just improve and improve and improve. Whereas in this instance, it's very different. Like you said, you can physically do something, you can physically go out and run your 5K or whatever, but it's almost like there's some kind of reaction that's happening and not necessarily making sense.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's delayed as well. Like, I'm quite, I've done, even in the last, since I got COVID, I've done a few things. I've been for like a long cycle or been for a long run, and actually got back and felt quite good. But then it's almost like there's this delay where, normal fatigue is like, you do the thing, you get fatigued, you eat, sleep, recover better. Whereas with this, it's like you do the thing, you feel good, and then you go to sleep maybe, and then you might even feel good the next day, but then like the next day it catches up on you. Or, it's like there's this like delay, which it's not normal. And it's quite interesting to use like the broken bone analogy as well, because I think that's one of the hardest things that has been to deal with it, is there is no timescale for this. There's no, like, this is the thing that you have, this is the rehab program, and then this, even like, you'll get a scale of like, you break your ankle, you go in, they'll say like, oh, well, in really good circumstances, you'll be back in, I don't know, 3 months. If it's like bad or you don't do your rehab too well, it might be like 9 months. But at least you've got a 3 to 9 month window. Whereas with this, I remember when I first got diagnosed with long COVID, a couple of weeks, basically, obviously, go to the doctor, I don't feel well, explain my symptoms, had COVID 3 weeks ago. They say, oh, well, it's just obviously long COVID. The average kind of recovery time is 4 to 12 weeks. Obviously, I hear 4 weeks, I'm like, okay, it's going to be 4 weeks like that. I can't even imagine 4 weeks at the moment, but like, I can't even imagine not training for 4 weeks, but I'll get through it. Obviously, you get to 4 weeks, no improvement. And then you kind of go, oh, well, it was 4 to 12. So like 8 is in the middle. So like aim for 8, and then you get to 8. And it's just this constant kind of like game of, I guess like cat and mouse, like chasing this like recovery that just to date hasn't come, which is, been pretty difficult to deal with at times. And I've got quite a good analogy for it actually, which is it's almost like someone comes and like drags you out your bed in the middle of the night, puts your running trainers on, pushes you out the door and just says, run, you've got to run this race. And there's just arrows on the ground and you just have to follow the arrows, but you don't know how long you're running for. And like sometimes you'll run and you follow the arrow and you'll just get to like a dead end. The arrow will just start pointing back, and then you just start running back down the same way you just came. And then the arrow takes you somewhere else, and you just keep following these arrows. And it's like, how do you pace yourself for that? Like, is the race 5K, or is it, half marathon, 100 miles? Like, and it's like, you just have to keep running because, you've been chucked out your flat in the night with your running trainers on, and, you don't have the keys to get back in. So you need to get to the end of the race. Like you need to get there. You can't go anywhere else, but you're just still running. You're still following these arrows. And it's like, how long? Okay. And then it's like, eventually like, okay, like I've been running for ages now. Like I'll stop and walk to pace myself because this is obviously a marathon, not a sprint. And then it's just this constant thing. And, you reach another arrow and you're like, okay, another arrow, whether that symbolizes another week or another month or whatever it is. And it's like, it's pointing you in a slightly different direction or whatever. But it's like I like to obviously compare everything, I guess, to a race of some sort. But that's kind of like how because I'm trying to explain to people like what it's been like, and it's impossible to really explain. But it's like, I feel like that gives a good example of like what it's like. And it's like, at the start, in that analogy, like I would have probably just started jogging at like, a kind of half marathon pace maybe. And then, you slowly start to realize like, oh, this might be longer than that. And it's like to do with pacing yourself, it's like, and also just how mentally to deal with, if you start running thinking you're going to run a 5K or something, and then all of a sudden someone says you need to run for 70K, and you're like, oh wow, like that's like, oh, well, I didn't bring any water with me. And like, I could have got a bit more sleep last night, or, whatever. It's like, I didn't really prepare for this. And then, but it's like, you're just telling yourself it's 70K. It's like, that's not the actual finish line. You get 70K and you're like, oh, I'll just keep going. So yeah, it's, I think that's quite a sad but good analogy to kind of get across to people how difficult it can be to kind of like deal with and to pace yourself as well.
It's a kind of ever moving goalpost in many ways as well, or an unknown goalpost as well. And yeah, I really want to come back to this, but I also wanted to ask you, following up on that, as somebody, I know you've mentioned how it's been difficult in terms of the unknown and the ever changing goalposts, but as somebody whose life and work and identity, I think in many ways has been shaped by fitness and being that I would imagine has shaped a huge part of your kind of identity. How has it been managing that kind of shift from being the Ironman guy and currently during this period of recovery, going from that to the position where you're at now?
Yeah, it's been difficult for sure. Like, and partially it was my own fault that prior to getting COVID, I did kind of have too much of my identity wrapped up in this one thing, and I maybe wasn't aware of how fragile that was. Because you never expect anything like that your health to get taken away from you. So it's like, it felt like a fairly safe bet to kind of be on this path where I get like most of my enjoyment. It's my hobby. It's my career in terms of like coaching other people. Everything was all wrapped up in this one thing. And I didn't realize quite how, how fragile that was and how difficult that would be to deal with if it got taken away. So yeah, it's definitely been difficult to deal with. I guess I've been on my own journey through that. And there's been, I listened to podcasts recently where they were talking about ego death. And I think to some degree I've had to have an ego death where everything that I used to think was important, like, oh, how fast can you run a half marathon? How much can you train a week? Like, how far can you swim? Like, how fast are you at cycling? Like, none of this stuff actually matters. It's like, all I want to do is just go out and ride my bike. Like, I don't even care. I won't even take my bike computer. Like, I just want to go ride my bike and like see a new road. and just simple things like that, which now I will have, and I do have a much bigger appreciation for just like the small things, or just going for a run, just doing like a lap of the park and coming back, and like not recording my watch, not posting on Strava. I don't care how many kudos I get. I don't care who follows me. Like all this stuff that I used to maybe put a bit too much emphasis in. I think I've obviously had to reevaluate all of that. And I'm not saying I'm, kind of dealing with that amazingly at all times. Like obviously I still, I guess, am dealing with that. And I think I'm in a good position that when I do get back to training, I'm going to have a much better appreciation of the small things, and I'm not going to care so much about the other stuff. I think obviously it is important to care to some degree about what you're doing. Otherwise you just wouldn't try at all. If I didn't care about how fast I can run, then like you're not going to push yourself, so there's obviously some degree, but it's just, I'll definitely have a different view on things. But yeah, I spoke to, one of the things I've done through these months has been speaking to a sports psychologist fairly regularly. I'm not speaking to her anymore just because it's quite an expensive hobby to have, speaking to her once a week. But yeah, she really helped me deal with my situation and just dealing with, as I said, she was specifically a sports psychologist, and she dealt with a lot of athletes dealing with maybe like injuries, or, potentially even like career-ending injuries, or, missing out on the Olympics, or like these sorts of things, which are, I guess, I don't want to say equally, but like also extremely difficult to deal with, in a different way. So I think she helped me just kind of put things into perspective a little bit, and concentrate on certain areas, and maybe just think about the why behind certain things that I was doing. So I definitely think I'm in a better place with that. As I said, I'm definitely not perfect, and like I definitely do struggle some days. Like just the other day, I was just really angry I just started thinking about, where I would have been now, almost 2 years later, in terms of like what I could have achieved, like what have I missed out on, essentially. Like it's almost like, these two universes, like there's two separate like parallel universes, right? There's one where I get COVID and I get long COVID, and there's one where, we didn't even talk about how I actually got COVID, which was so dumb. It was like in the sauna at the gym. We're in there for 10 minutes, and this woman was like, after 10 minutes, pipes up to someone else in there going, "Oh yeah, my daughter's at home with all the symptoms of COVID." And I was like,
great. Thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah. I'm 3 months, 3 weeks, out from my Ironman, which I've been training for 10 months. So obviously I left.
I bet you curse. I bet every time you're having a bad day, you're cursing that fucking woman in the.
Do you know what's so it's funny? I actually don't like. I've forgiven her. I don't know who she is, but I've had to forgive her. I actually saw her, interestingly enough, like months later. Like I was back at. I've moved now, but when I was back at that gym, and like I didn't even have any feelings towards her. I was obviously like. I mean, I think it's irresponsible what she did, but like, but it is also, I guess, like an interesting it's an interesting example of like the butterfly effect, right? Like she has just been like, oh, like, that's fine, I'll just go to the sauna, like, but like she doesn't know, like she's literally like fucked my life, like not to be dramatic, lady in the sauna, but like the impact you've had on someone else's life just from like one small decision you can make. And I'm kind of laughing about it now because I guess if you don't laugh, you cry. But yeah, it's just funny to know that that's how I got it. But anyway, yeah, I feel like there's these two parallel universes. There's one where I just like I didn't go to the sauna that day, and I just stayed at home and watched Netflix, whatever. And I went on to do that Ironman, and then who knows what else I would have managed to do in that time, and who knows what else might have happened. I might have that might have been an even worse ending. But this is the existence that I'm in. This is the reality that I'm living, and this is the situation I have to deal with. So I try not to think about that sort of stuff too much, but sometimes those thoughts really creep in, especially, looking on social media, you see, or Strava, you see other people doing things that you want to be doing and you get jealous. That's just a natural emotion. And obviously with my job as well, I coach people to do the things that I want to be doing. So that's also been a bit of an interesting, I guess, dynamic at times where, I've got people messaging me, telling me like how great their training is going, how good they feel, achieving like personal best. And of course I like get satisfaction from that, but there is also like an element of jealousy sometimes where I'm like so close, like I'm like involved in this person doing something that I want to do. So there's this kind of like conflicted emotion sometimes with that, which has been also difficult to deal with.
Mm. I guess it also though opens up some kind of doors, like you said about previously, with a newfound appreciation. And when you get back to feeling your best as well, you have this just immense appreciation for any kind of exercise. I mean, I spoke to Una a little while back, and she's like a former rower. She was going to go to the Olympics and then had to retire at 23 or 24. I can't remember what it was. And she was just saying how she would just trade all of her rowing, all of the Olympics, anything to do with that, just to get rid of her current symptoms, get back to some degree
Yeah.
of kind of baseline. But I think it is challenging because, like you said, especially when you've had that as an outlet, and also I feel like this as a guy as well, quite often, like so often you're, say for me, my outlet and my way of feeling good and of feeling useful and of feeling empowered is through going out and doing hard shit, whether that be like my judo, BJJ, going for hard training sessions. And whenever I've been feeling rough or feeling just unsettled, that has always been the antidote. That's always been the answer to whatever kind of struggle, whether I'm feeling sad with something that's happened, whether I've been frustrated at work, whether I've been cooped up, whether I have things going on, or just feeling a bit foggy minded. It's always been the answer to go and do something hard. And I kind of, in many ways, like earn that respect for myself by doing that hard stuff. And I feel like it's something that is, I felt like that has been something that has been quite difficult to overcome. I don't know what your experience is with that as well.
I mean, I think, yeah, like I think you get a lot from exercise. Like, I think what's the first thing that if someone's feeling a little bit down or, feeling a little bit stressed, even if it's just go for a walk, it doesn't have to be go and run a marathon, but it's oftentimes the solution that people will try and give you is go and do exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as cheesy as it kind of sounds, like I think I had found my purpose in what I was doing in terms of just it ticked all the boxes for me in terms of like it made me feel good. Like I was progressing, I was achieving goals. Like I could go to bed at night kind of feeling accomplished, even if it was on my rest day. It was like, okay, but I've done my rest day, which is going to allow me to absorb the training that I've done from the previous 6 days. So it was like this, it just ticked all the boxes for me in terms of, it makes you feel good. It makes you, as I said, yeah, achieving goals. And, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling whatever, it's like go for a run, and like 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, you're going to feel better. It's like people talk about runner's high, endorphins, like all this sort of stuff. Like it's not made up. Like it's true. Like you do feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And, you try and tell it someone who doesn't run, they're like, nah. And I used to be that guy. I used to be like, why the hell would you run a half marathon or a marathon? Like I used to, yeah, sit there. I lived with a guy who was getting into cycling, and he'd go and cycle for like 5 hours on a Saturday morning, come back, and I would just be still sitting in the flat, having not moved basically for the day. And I would just look at him like he was crazy. Like I just didn't get it until you do it, and then and obviously initially it's not just immediate, right? If you just, if you've sat on the sofa for 10 years and then you just put on a pair of shoes, you're not just going to go out the door for 10 minutes, come back and feel amazing. Like it's a journey that you have to go on, and it's, you're not going to get the reward straight away because that'd be too easy. So, there's this almost like initial periods where you need to get through before you get the reward. It's like a delayed reward. So, yeah, I understand that some people don't get it, but yeah, as the saying goes, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So I used to, yeah, that was one of my kind of like mantras. But yeah, as I said, as cheesy as it is, it did kind of, I felt like it had given me, maybe it wasn't my purpose, but it gave my life purpose, if that's a bit of a less cheesy way to kind of say it. Like every day had a purpose, and every month every week and every month and every year, it was like this constant build, one thing after the other. And yeah, the other thing is if someone's feeling, I guess, like down or depressed or whatever, yeah, as I said, one of the first things that you would say to them is, have you tried going to the gym, or have you tried going for a walk out in nature?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's the one thing that you can't do. So it's like, what do I do? And that's the kind of rhetorical question that that I have to ask myself every day.
What have you been doing to deal with that, and how have you been finding that purpose?
Yeah, it's been tough. Like, obviously, I've been still doing my coaching, so I can get some enjoyment, and I live vicariously, I guess, in some aspects through the people that I coach. So I guess that's become, in some ways, more important because I'm not getting that from my own experience. I've got into meditation in the last 2 years, basically. Something which I never did before. When I first started, I really, really struggled to even do like a minute. Like really, like just didn't just obviously it's like anything else. It's a bit of a journey that you go on, and initially you sit there and you think I'm not doing it right, and I can't switch my brain off. I just want to like check my phone. I think like everyone pretty much these days is addicted to their phone to some degree. Some obviously a lot worse than others. But yeah, I would be checking like how long's left. When I was just doing a minute, like just turn your phone over and just listen to the the song that the app plays for 1 minute, and I would really struggle. And I've now I've got that up. I've done I don't do any crazy like hour-long meditations. I just don't think I could manage that. Or not that I couldn't manage it, but I just don't think there would be a benefit. I've kind of been on a journey with that as well, in terms of I was kind of applying that same progressive mindset to meditation and trying to do more and more and more and more, when I kind of one day just had this realization of why do I need to meditate for 20 minutes? And I've like flipped that almost now to try and find like the minimal effective dose of meditation, rather than how much meditation can I do today? Like I'm just going to sit in a tree like a monk for 24 hours and just like look at the inside of my eyeballs. Like, what's the benefit of that? Like you're not living. I kind of, but that is just naturally how my mindset goes, right? It's like I start doing something and then I want to do like as much of it as I can, or I want to be the best meditator. I want to
do it perfectly. I want to do it perfectly. With something like meditation, just not the purpose of it at all. But it's like, I need to do it better, and I need to do more of it.
Yeah, so, that one doesn't count because like I let a thought in. It's like, no, that's like, but this is like that, but that's the journey of meditation. Yeah. But that is the journey of meditation. It's like, you kind of, and I've not been doing it for that long compared to some people, but yeah, I've been doing it for over a year now, and every day, like I'm really rigid with that, like every single day, at least once a day. I'm now trying to do it like morning and night. And I feel like, it's not some sort of miracle cure. And it's not like I'm really angry about my situation or really feeling depressed or whatever. And then I go meditate and I'm just like, feeling great, and off I go my day and have a great day. But it's definitely like leveled me out, like 100% helped a lot. And I would recommend it to anyone, whether you're going through something like this or not. I think it's something that everyone could use more of, is just, even if it's just time away from your phone. And I guess, that is something else just on the meditation topic. That is something that I realized. So I said I hadn't been doing it before, but what I realized was, in some ways, like exercise was my meditation. I think I'd had this impression of meditation prior to getting COVID of, like the monk in the tree, sitting cross-legged, oming into the inside of his eyelids. But that isn't the only way to get headspace. And I think I had inadvertently been getting that calmness of mind or peace of mind from running. Mostly I found running specifically, for some reason, it's just enough physical stimulus to calm the brain for whatever reason. Like cycling, I get it a little bit, but it's just slightly different for me. Like my mind will wander a little bit when I'm cycling, I guess, just because it's a bit less interactive, I guess. Like you can kind of cruise through, whereas with running, you should be kind of like, you're concentrating on what you're doing. And then I've never really liked swimming. It's always, I've kind of loved to hate swimming. So I never really got any kind of like meditative experiences through swimming. But yeah, running for me specifically was my version of meditation. I just wasn't aware of it until I started doing actual meditation. I was like, oh, like I was getting that from running. So that was kind of an interesting like revelation that I had. But yeah, I've not been able to go back to running now to be in the moment when I'm doing that. But as we said, like I've now got a different outlook and appreciation for certain things. So I'm ready to go back to feeling healthy and going back to training. I'm just waiting for the body to catch up.
Yeah, I can't imagine thrashing in the pool has ever been meditative. Just I've never. But I think it's so true with running, especially because the whole thing with meditation, you're pulling yourself back and you're focusing, and the thoughts arise, the thoughts will pop up and come back, and then you bring yourself back to something, whether it be the breath, whether it be some other kind of element that you're focusing on, and yeah, I think it's quite a common thing to have that with some kind of steady cardio based, like running, like with cycling. And I think
Yeah.
for so many people it's been yeah, meditation is something that is invaluable. And I know for me, I found it frustrating because I want to be going and doing things that can settle my mind, and exercise and hard exercise has always been that thing, and in many ways as well put me in a kind of meditative state. But in many ways it's harder actually, becoming able to totally just sit with whatever you're feeling, whatever you're experiencing, and take and accept that kind of stillness. That's actually something that is very difficult and very very hard to do. And doing meditation progressively allows you to kind of begin to like pull back from, as many athletes experience, constantly sitting in this seat leaning forwards, and allows you to kind of pull back a little bit and sit with what you're experiencing. And I think that translates into to many aspects of your life, especially with those that are dealing with any with symptoms as well.
Yeah, I think that's where when I'm talking about like the minimal effective dose came in for me, because I was finding this kind of like counterintuitive thing would happen in the mornings with, because I want to meditate like first thing in the morning, like basically get up, and it's like all basically the first thing I do other than like breathe. So but I would like try and be doing like, okay, 15 minutes and then 20 minutes, and it's like, but then I'd be putting it off because I didn't want to do it, so I wouldn't end up doing it till like 10 o'clock. And I'm like, wait, like this is like counterintuitive, because I'm like now
Yeah.
delaying doing the thing that I want to do because it's like I don't want to do it. So where can I find this minimal effective dose of, and for me now that's like 12 minutes, which to me when I started would be like crazy. I'd be like, to do that for 12 minutes, like it's impossible. But I guess like anything, and yeah, I always like to compare everything back to sport. It's like with running, right? You can't just go and run a marathon straight away. It's like you might only be able
No.
to run 1K, but it's like the more you do it, you build up your fitness level, and you eventually can get there. So yeah, for me now, 12 minutes, it's pretty much the first thing I do every morning. Again, I'm not perfect with it, but that's kind of like the minimal effective dose. I get what I want from it without it, me delaying doing it because I'm like, oh, I can't, and sometimes you've got things to do. So you're like, oh, I can't take 15 minutes out of my day. Like, it's like, oh my God, it's already like 8 o'clock. Like, so if I start meditation now, it's going to be 8:15 before I can even do anything. So you're like, then you don't do it because you've got things to do. And then all of a sudden it's 10 o'clock. And then, so yeah, I found 12 minutes is like the perfect, as I said, yeah, minimal effective dose. I get the kind of like calmness and headspace from it without kind of putting it off because it's something that I can't afford to do time wise.
Yeah, you don't want it to become a chore, and that's why I read Atomic Habits a little while back, and that's why I really like this whole premise of doing something and you say, I'm just going to do it for 2 minutes. So then you set yourself a low barrier to entry, and then once you start that activity, if you feel like continuing, you can. If not, then you go. But I think,
Yeah,
yeah, avoiding it becoming like a kind of chore is something that is very important, because you don't want to add more stress and be like, fuck's sake, I've got to do this now. It should be something that is hopefully enjoyable.
yeah,
So one of the most frustrating things that a lot of people experience is this inability to receive any kind of direction from their doctors. So many people receive no kind of help, and are very much kind of put in this position of, well, we don't really know what to do with you. You're kind of going to have to figure it out for yourself. What was your experience when you went to see the doctors and try and figure out what was going on?
yeah. Frustrating for sure. Like I'm in Australia at the moment, but I was back in the UK for the first 18 months of my long COVID, and yeah. So initially, I was like, well, very initially, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get over this. It's just like a bit of fatigue, and then when that didn't pass, I was like, okay, I need to go to the doctor and actually see what's going on here. So, yeah, a lot of kind of, and like I get it, like the NHS is, you know, overrun, and there's much more important things that they need to deal with than me. But at the same time, I'm my most important thing, right? So like to me, this is the most important thing, and I feel like I needed help, and it was a bit of a fight to start with. just getting an appointment at the GP, and then you would go and you just have this, you would just feel like rushed of like, okay, oh, how long's it been? Oh, only 4 weeks. Like, oh, well, like, basically nothing, we're not going to do anything until 12 weeks because it's like 4 to 12 weeks is the kind of average recovery time. Yeah, it's just long COVID, like put you in the pile and go away. So you have to wait to 12 weeks, which in like, hindsight, it's like, that just happened. But in the moment, that was 12 weeks long, which was a long time to sit and wait. And then you go back and then kind of forcing them to do blood tests. And when nothing comes back in the blood test or the blood test that they do, they just put you in this pile. And I felt like that it was almost like an excuse for the doctor to be able to just move on. It's like, oh, well, you've got long COVID. We don't really know what to do with you. So sorry. And that led me to doing then private blood tests, seeing private specialists. Obviously, I didn't really get any answers. I guess as I said towards the start, long COVID is a diagnosis of elimination. So I guess I've eliminated a lot of other things, but have I eliminated everything? I don't know. Like, I'm not a doctor, but could there be some abstract illness or thing that I have? I've obviously sat and thought all sorts of things that could be wrong with me. Do I have like something like on my, like potentially like a growth on your brain that's pushing on this bit that causes fatigue, or like could I have like some sort of something else going on in my body? As I said, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but hypothetically there could be something going on, right? That it takes a very specific test to test for, and we've not tested for it. But I think the kind of logical conclusion is that I do have long COVID, or a version of stress overload that's caused this kind of fatigue-like symptoms. But there's always been this kind of like thought in the background of like, well, what if it's this, or what if it's this? And you Google and you go in like long COVID Facebook groups, and I find them a pretty depressing place, to be honest. I've had to mute them all because I think as well, a lot of people, and I battled with this a lot. Like I didn't want to like identify as someone who was fatigued. I felt like that was almost like admitting defeat, or accepting like weakness of some sort, when I don't think that's the case. But I do think there is an element of there's an element of acceptance that's positive. Like you have to accept the situation you're in. You can't fight. And I tried to fight it for so long, and that doesn't work. You can't just wake up every day and be like, nah, like I'm just going to get on with my own life, like regardless of how I feel. Like you can only do that for so long. So there's a portion of acceptance that's good, but I think there's also on the other end of the scale, like some people just go, oh well, I've got long COVID, and like, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm not going to try. I'm just going to use it almost as an excuse to, I don't want to say be lazy, but just they identify as having long COVID, and therefore they can't do anything. And it's almost like a victim mindset. And I do think, so I think there's like a middle ground in there somewhere where you have to accept your situation, but I think you should also always have a plan for like getting out of it, even, no matter how long that's going to take. And as we discussed, we don't know how long that's going to take. But yeah, on the kind of NHS side or the doctor side, it was extremely frustrating. I remember constantly being on my GP's case of like, oh, maybe could we test this thing, or do these blood tests, and they're kind of saying to me, oh, well, I'm not really like allowed to put these blood tests through because we tested them within like the last 3 months. And understand that they can't just allocate unlimited time and funds to me. As I said, I know that there's people in a worse situation than me from like the NHS's point of view, but from my point of view, like as I said, I am the most important patient. It's like, you need to put your own gas mask on before you can put it onto others. So it's like I need to get myself back to 100% before I can start thinking about other people, selfishly as that sounds. But I think everyone would say the same, right? Like everyone's own health is the most important to them. So it was extremely frustrating, and I kind of got to the point where I just gave up with it, to be honest. I think I just actually had someone today messaging me something about like doctors and whatever, and I've not read it yet. I'm probably not going to, just because I've just kind of given up with that sort of side of things, and I've almost lost faith in the healthcare system for what I have. I think if you break your leg, great. If you have the kind of like standard illnesses that have been around for a long time, or injuries or illnesses, and you can go and get operations or get the medicine that you need, I think that's fine. But I just think obviously what what we've been experiencing is a new thing, and
Hmm.
they don't know. And it's not, it's not their fault that they don't know. It's just they don't know, and they're also overrun, which leads to them kind of. I had a conversation with my GP at one stage. I remember where I got the feeling that she was just kind of trying to say to me, like, look, like I can't, like I want to help you, but I can't. And I've got like,
Yeah.
however many other patients like with all these other things that are wrong with them, and I can help them.
Yeah.
So I need to go and help them, and like I can't just essentially waste my time like speaking to you on the phone once a week or whatever it is, which I understand. But yeah, as I said, obviously for me, I felt like I wanted more, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the case.
Kind of brushed aside. I think this is a very common experience that many people have had, and it's a frustration with the healthcare. And going back to the acceptance point, quickly, I do think it's getting that balance is something I struggled with as well. But because you are in this present reality and this current existence, and whatever we're experiencing is happening, so there has to be an element of acceptance and removing that friction from totally fighting it, like you mentioned. I think that total resistance is sometimes unhelpful, and this denial about no, and just continue to push through. But then also, like you said, I think there's that balance between that and then also, okay, this is my present reality. I accept what is happening, but I will do this to try and continue forward. Though I would say there's like certainly from when I've spoken to people who are, because I've spoken to people with like severe CFS, and they're generally like bed bound. I think especially for in those kind of states, it must be tough, and that's where again I think the health service, again, this ties back to that failing, because although long COVID, so this is something that I often have a bit of an issue with in terms of the description. So if we look at what the technical terms are, I think long COVID is anything over 12 weeks, and then chronic fatigue is any of those similar type symptoms over 6 months that have been triggered by some kind of virus or bacterial trigger or something like that. And this has been around for a long time. Like people have had glandular fever, which has then turned into
Yeah.
chronic fatigue. People have had bacterial infections, which have then turned into chronic fatigue. Stress things. There's a lot of these kind of post-viral illnesses which have happened. And I think sometimes there's not this separation between post-viral fatigue and the more chronic fatigue, because I've had post-viral fatigue when I had glandular fever, which lasted around 3 to 4 months. And that was just conventional tiredness. I was just tired all the time, but the normal tiredness. Whereas the more
Yeah.
chronic fatigue or long COVID that we kind of would say is a much different phenomenon. And it's something that has actually been around for a while, but because there's not been any kind of objective biomarker to which we can say, okay, we can see from this X-ray, or we can see from your scan or blood test that you have X, Y, Z, and then we put you on a treatment protocol. Because we haven't had that, and we haven't had that yet, it's been very difficult to formally diagnose. But I'm actually having a conversation with researcher from Imperial, actually, because they have got now blood tests which show a degree of these sort of changes and mechanisms from which hopefully there will be at least a diagnosis, so you can just say, right, this is, and then for further treatments.
Yeah.
That'd be good. I'm going to list off finally some of the treatments that you have tried for long COVID.
Sure.
Seeing as the healthcare providers and healthcare systems were not providing much in terms of answers, and I think many people will relate to this. So, got hyperbaric oxygen therapy, ice baths, acupuncture, red light therapy, meditation, coffee enemas, more than 50 supplements, mushrooms, bioresonance, nicotine patches, salt rooms, and witch doctors. So I wanted to get your thoughts on which of these has been the most beneficial, and also to highlight the kind of the level of desperation that people are sort of forced down when you hear something like, well, this is just what you have, we don't know what to do about it, kind of go and do with that what you will.
Yeah.
How you've and I think many people resonate with that.
Yeah, I think desperation is the word. Like, for sure, is like there's been points where I'm desperate to get better, and I will try almost anything to try and get better. But I actually wrote a post on Instagram the other day saying something along the lines of trying anything as far as like it's had to be do nothing. You know, it's like, oh, I'll do anything to get better, but it's like that anything has to be do nothing. It's like you just need to allow your body to recover, and that's almost like the most frustrating thing because you can't do anything. But yeah, there's some pretty rogue things in that list, isn't there? But yeah, I think desperation is the kind of overarching words to describe a lot of them. Some of them I think have benefits. I'm actually doing hyperbaric oxygen again now, just because it's actually quite a lot more accessible and affordable here in Australia. So I'm obviously not cured. So, you know, whether it's having a positive impact or not, I don't know. I think from what I understand of it, you need to do quite a lot of sessions to see a benefit. And I was finding when I first tried it, when I first got ill in Edinburgh, I was getting really claustrophobic, but I also didn't have the, I guess, skills of meditation and breath work and all these sorts of things that I've developed to allow me to kind of deal with that back then. Whereas, you know, here I've had those kind of similar claustrophobic feelings, but I'm able to get through and not allow it to become a stressful experience, which it kind of was initially, which was kind of almost defeating the point or you know, the purpose of the session, because it's like I was going there because I've got this stress overload thing, but I'm going through this extremely stressful claustrophobic feeling to get myself better. Yeah, so it's like I don't think that was necessarily working. I think as well, like just to kind of talk about those things in general, like we can talk about any of them specifically if you want to, but I think there's a lot of people out there that will like prey on people, and I think with your health, like people, if you get your health impacted or taken away from you, people will do anything or spend, you know, any amount of money to get better. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are like preying on those people, including myself. So, you know, there's someone selling a miracle cure such as bioresonance, which, I mean, if it works for you, it works for you, but it didn't work for me. And from my understanding of what it is, it was like a little disc I would wear on my chest, and, you know, it was woo-woo, to be honest. But yeah, you know, I gave her quite a lot of money for this like stupid thing I was doing. And then I was, seeing this like witch doctor guy. He's not actually a witch doctor, that's just what I called him. Just a strange guy that would like give, and then like all the supplements I've tried, and you know, you'd listen to a podcast and someone says, "Oh, I've seen really good results with Cohen's MQ10 or nattokinase or, you know, any of these ones." I almost don't want to like mention them, because if someone else is listening and they go, "Oh," and then they'll go and do the same thing I did, which is just like order it straight off the internet and just start taking it, and it's like, but maybe it will work for them. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I've tried all sorts of supplements, which obviously that's my own doing. Like I think, you know, and, you know, none of which I've spent like a crazy amount of money on, but I guess the total amount of money I've spent on, I guess, yeah, I've estimated like 50. It's probably quite a lot, but the main issue I have is with the people that kind of sell you this or convince you that they have the solution, and you do your sessions with them, and all of a sudden you're wearing this like metal disc on your chest for like 3 weeks, and you're believing that she's like sending frequencies through the air into your disc that are like healing you, and and then after a month you're like, what the fuck am I doing? You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if there's anything that
rationality. I've always thought of myself as like a very hyper rational person. I'd always look at the evidence, come from a scientific background, and yet a few years later I find myself standing on a Zoom call, closing my eyes, like chanting in front of some crazy. And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
I was like, "What's happened to me?"
Yeah. Someone sent me. Obviously, I've been posting quite a lot in recent weeks and months about long COVID. I went through a long period where I just wasn't really posting anything about anything on social media. I've kind of started posting again, so I've had obviously people replying. You know, they send me various different things, and yeah, I had someone send me one the other day that was some woman's profile that does some sort of healing over Zoom, and I'm glad now that I'm able to like kind of almost look at it rationally and be like, this woman is not the answer. And she was like American and very like just not my type of person. You know, and I was like, I could identify that wasn't going to work for me, but I'm glad because yeah, there's been times, and I'm not saying I'm not going to do it again. So yeah, who knows if we speak at some point in the future, and hopefully we can have an episode on about my recovery, and I might try some crazy stuff between now and then. But who knows, it might work. So I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of the sick game that we've found ourselves in, is like the answer might be out there, and it might be some crazy woman on the internet, but chances are it's not.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've come to terms of like the holistic, the general holistic, and also back to basics. I think has been one of the things that seems, certainly for me, has been helpful. But I agree. I think when you've got a group of people who generally, I think 95% of people would genuinely do anything and would sell everything they own if you said this will 100% get you back. Like I think
Yeah.
pretty much everybody would do that. It's very easy for things to take advantage of. But
Yeah, but that's unfortunately the mindset that gets you into brewing specialty coffee and putting up your bum. So
yeah, true. We've all been there.
well,
Whatever floats your boat. Whatever floats your boat. And a final message from you that you could leave our listeners with. So, you know, advice for people in the early stages, an outlook onto the future, and your plans
yeah,
for going forward as well.
yeah. Obviously, you sent a rough list of kind of topics that we discussed through, and this was one that I've struggled to kind of at least even think about, because I don't know what I can say to someone. I think I was trying to think more of like, what would I say to myself, you know, and
Yeah,
but I know that myself back then just would have not listened. So yeah, I think it's and obviously, like, you know, if someone's just got COVID, like, or they're just, you know, maybe a week or a couple months in, like, one thing I have learned is everyone's experience is different. And, you know, I've kind of like laughed about some of these things that I've done, but that might genuinely, like, that might be the answer for that individual. So like, I think one thing is, don't be afraid to try and find something that's going to help. Like, obviously try your best to be rational and, you know, maybe run it by some of your friends before just sending money to people on the internet or buying a random product that's, you know, in hindsight probably not going to work. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that you can still enjoy your life to some degree. I think it's very easy to get into this mindset of like, oh well, my life is kind of on pause, and I've kind of described that as a few times when talking about it. I'm like, oh, I just felt like my life's been on pause for a year, and it was for a year and a bit. Whereas now, you know, in recent months, like, I've moved to Australia. I've just kind of decided that, okay, this is the situation that I'm in. I can't just sit around and wait for it to get better. And, you know, it's not been easy. And obviously there's been stressors with that, you know, packing up my life and like deciding what to bring with me and putting things in storage and selling them and like all these sorts of things, that it would have been easier to just stay where I was. But I've had to kind of force myself to get on with my life and not just sit around and wait to get better. At the same time, obviously my number one goal is still to get better. So it's kind of this like balance of like doing a little bit of living while
yeah,
still wanting to get back to your old life. So yeah, it's not a very succinct point really, is it, in terms of like advice to other people. But I think, and as cheesy as it is, it's like you just have to take each day as it comes, and like just again referring everything back to kind of endurance races or running 100 miles or whatever. And it is like, you know, my advice to someone who's setting out to run 100 miles is you can't think about running 100 miles. Like, you would never start. You'd be like, holy shit, like 100 miles. Like, I wouldn't even want to drive 100 miles. So like, you can't think about the 100 miles. Like, you need to just think about like mile one. And
mm-hmm.
I think in some ways, my background has set me up to be able to deal with this better than potentially some others, because I've endured challenges before. It's just this challenge that I'm currently enduring is not a voluntary one, and it's not a kind of standardized, you know, marathon or Ironman or whatever. But I guess it is like a true test of, you know, am I who I say I am, in terms of like strong-willed, able to get through things, try and keep a positive mindset, enjoy the process, and like try to, I've thought about the future and I've thought about looking back into the current struggle that I'm in, and I'm hoping that I'll enjoy it in hindsight. Of like,
Yeah.
it's a journey that I've been on, and in the moment it wasn't great, but running 100 miles, like mile 87, that wasn't great either, but I enjoyed the whole experience and I enjoyed the person that I became at the other end. So I'm trying to have a positive mindset like that. It doesn't always happen, and yeah, it's a work in progress. But I think, yeah, my kind of like number one thing would just be like take each day as it comes, try not to like think about the bigger picture, and also just try to keep living while also trying to get better, while also not doing too much. So it's like a very fine balance of, you can't just go out and do whatever you want, because you've got this new body that you're having to learn how to operate. It's not the same. It doesn't have the same health bar as your old one. You can't just go for a run and then go and see your mates and then, get 3 hours sleep and then get straight up the next morning and go and do something else. Like you have to adapt, but it's not just because you can't do what you used to be able to do, just do nothing. So I guess that would be my advice.
Amazing. Craig, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate having you on. And I look forward to doing another one in the future when you're recovered.
Awesome. Thanks, mate. Look forward to it.